Big Ten Media Days in full swing. Conference realignment and scheduling formats going to be a hot topic of conversation for Commissioner Kevin Warren and his staff. The event will see half of the league's coaches speak today, the other half Wednesday, in an off-season rite of passage. As for who's expected to finish where, those preseason predictions going to be made later out in Indianapolis. But here's how the Big Ten finished last season. Michigan finally got the best of Ohio State under Jim Harbaugh in the win over their bitter rivals, and then that conference championship got them to the CFP playoff. All right, let's check in with Dennis Dodd, who's at Big Ten Media Days. And Dennis, what is sort of the hot topic du jour for you when it comes to Kevin Warren, what you think maybe he needs to address today?
Yeah, he's going to give his State of the Union address this morning at Lucas Oil Stadium, and I think it all has to do with USC and UCLA. What went into that thinking? What prompted him to go after that? I just read a story. I wasn't sure of this before. He is negotiating the rights himself for the new media rights, which is really out of the box for a Power 5 commissioner, but he has chosen to do that, and we're waiting on pins and needles, at least the college football world, for that new Big Ten agreement, which is supposed to top $1 billion, and that's without USC and UCLA. It may go over $1 billion annually and be by far the biggest media rights contract ever. Kevin Warren's tenure started off a little bit rocky in January of 2020. He took over, 2 months after that we had COVID. He canceled the season, brought it back on a truncated basis. Ohio State played for the national championship that year and lost. But things have gotten a little more smooth, especially with USC, UCLA. This is going to be, I think, really a stewardship question. That's something I want to ask him today. Does he feel a stewardship for the game? Because as Lane Kiffin said last week at the SEC Media Days, Texas, Oklahoma, just didn't seem right to the SEC. USC and UCLA to the Big Ten just seems wrong.
Let me follow up on that before we move to our other topics real quickly here. Do we anticipate, since the news came out, Dennis, and where you are, the buzz still surrounding Notre Dame and potentially another program to add to the Big Ten here in addition to UCLA and USC? What are you hearing on that front?
Yeah, that's in midair. That really depends on when the media rights are announced and how much they are. Then the question becomes, because the money is so big, does that put financial pressure on Notre Dame to finally join a conference? Now, I'm told by multiple sources, Notre Dame's overwhelming preference is to stay, as an independent. I reported last week that they were seeking $75 million a year from NBC to stay independent and stay on their air. And perhaps, NBC would add some shoulder programming with the Big 12. That's all to be determined because everybody has to figure out where the Big Ten sits. And if the number is $100 million per school, if, say, Notre Dame joins, how do you turn that down? I mean, they've left money, Notre Dame has left money on the table for decades. They've been lured by the Big Ten for decades. Is this the inflection point? And I'm told, by a lot of people that nothing may happen until Jack Swarbrick, the AD at Notre Dame, leaves, retires. It won't be on his watch. That's how determined he is. But all that's yet to be determined until this media rights deal is announced.
All right, we'll look out for that. Back to on the field. On a scale of 1 to 10, Dennis, chances of Michigan repeating what they did last year?
Yeah, not good. I'd say probably a 5. Ohio State's loaded. I think we saw that after that devastating loss to Michigan in the game last November. They did rebound and then had a great Rose Bowl win over Utah, gave up too many points and too many yards probably for their liking. But I think you have two of the top, Heisman Trophy candidates in the same backfield, C.J. Stroud and Jackson Smith-Njigba, the receiver who went for over 300 yards against Utah in that game. I would dare say the quarterback, C.J. Stroud, is probably the number one candidate to win the Heisman. I know Bryce Young, has a chance to go back-to-back, but that's unlikely. The offense is going to be tremendous. They are going to be favored. The defense needs work. That's why they went out and paid big money, Ohio State did, to get Oklahoma State defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. And he's one of the best in the business. But can his scheme alone improve kind of a shaky Ohio State defense?
You brought up inflection points earlier. We had that follow-up to Notre Dame. What about Mel Tucker? What are the chances we look back at his deal? That was pretty big, Dennis, as an inflection point of what we're seeing right now, the latest being Kirby Smart, of course, at Georgia.
Yeah, we've seen the fallout from what I call now the Mel Tucker effect. Last November, he got in the middle of the season, got a 10-year, $9.5 million contract. I believe it's all guaranteed. If not, a good portion of it is guaranteed for a guy, we should be reminded, who's 18 and 14 in his career. Now, he's got a great agent, Neil Cornrich, who created a market that a lot of people wanted Mel Tucker. In the NFL, he's well respected. He's been a coordinator in the SEC, and now he's doing great things at Michigan State. The first coach, I think, ever to beat Michigan in his first two meetings with them at Michigan State. That says something about him to begin with. But I think it's the Mel Tucker effect. Mel Tucker, a guy who's 18 and 14, is going to get a decade-long contract worth almost $10 million a year. Well, you've seen it. Kirby Smart just last week got a 10-year deal worth $112 million. Ryan Day was taken care of earlier this summer. His deal, I think he makes $9 million now and goes out to 2028. 10-year contracts have become the new, what used to be 5-year contracts. So he's had a big effect, what he did. Now he just has to go on and prove it and win championships.
Dennis, I'll get you out of here on this. What more can you tell us on what you have on CBSSports.com? The Union in college with quarterback Sean Clifford of Penn State leading the way.
Yeah, Sean Clifford, as of Friday, was, I dare say, the leader in a movement to organize Penn State players that included a list of demands from an organization out of Minneapolis called the College Football Players Association that included two really kind of benign demands: better health care regarding postgraduate health care and access to independent health care. Kids like to go to their own doctors. That seemed fine. The third demand was a share of the media rights revenue. And there's one way that can be negotiated, it seems like, and that would be collective bargaining. While that language wasn't used in the story I wrote on Friday, I've since seen a slide deck that was presented to the Penn State players on July 14th in the team meeting room. About 100 players were there, and they were shown a slide deck by this organizer named Jason Stahl of Minneapolis, a former Minnesota professor, that used the words unionize. Their goal, or his goal, was to eventually unionize all the Penn State players and all of the Big Ten players and bring the Big Ten to the table for collective bargaining talks by next spring. Now, since then, since word leaked from my story on Friday, Sean Clifford has kind of disassociated himself from this group. He will be here tomorrow with Penn State, I assume, to talk about it. But right now, it's just kind of hanging in midair. It's kind of the next step, Tommy. Not saying this will particularly go anywhere, but this is the biggest thing since the word union was attached to Northwestern back in 2015. It's going to happen at some point. Not necessarily a union, but I think collectively bargaining and revenue sharing.
All right, we'll check that out on CBSSports.com. Dennis, certainly appreciate it. Enjoy Indy, of course, for the media days. Looking forward to your updates. Cover 3 podcast, win total picks in the ACC Atlantic.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.